Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another restful episode of true, scary stories to help you fall asleep. Today, we're going to be reading true dating app horror stories. I hope you enjoy them. So, without further ado, lay back, relax, and enjoy these true, scary stories. This happened about 6 years ago. I was single and on Bumble. I met Zach, and after talking for a bit, agreed to meet. We went for dinner and got on well. He had brought flowers and arranged with the waitress to put them on the table, which I thought was unexpected but nice. He had been to a good school, had a good job, and was polite and funny. He basically checked every box on paper. He told stories about his friends and family. All seemed totally normal. We went for drinks after dinner and went home. The next morning, I got a text from him. I had a great time. Let's do it again. Although there was nothing wrong with him, I just didn't feel a spark. So I said, thanks so much for a great night, and explained it wasn't really what I was looking for, but had a nice time meeting him. I expected that to be it, or for him to say no worries, but I got another text. What was wrong, haha? Least you can do is give it another chance. He offered drinks nearby. I didn't answer, and that's where things took a turn. Zach started sending me extremely long messages. How dare you do this? We had something really special. I've talked to all of my friends and they said that it sounded like something special too. He would get angry. You're selfish and heartless. How could you hurt me like this? The least you could do is answer me. And would then apologize. I'm so sorry. I'm a good guy. I just feel so strongly about this because I've never felt this way before, and I know that this is true love. I need you to know why you don't see it too. Please just tell me what went wrong. Let me give you the chance to see what I see. It went on, essay-length messages about how he felt about me and what we could be together. This continued all day, every day for around a week. 20 plus long messages a day. He would also continuously call me. By the weekend, I was getting calls almost every 10 minutes. My doorbell had also started to ring continuously. When I checked the door camera, whoever it was crouching down so I couldn't see them. That day, I blocked his number. I didn't get any more surprise visits and moved shortly thereafter. In the following years, I met someone, and we had a son together. Life went on. In the last week, I checked my LinkedIn and Instagram. I had 2 new requests, both from Zach. So, although you seemingly still want to, Zach, let's not meet again. A little while back, I decided I needed to get back out there and start trying to meet people. Not necessarily actively looking for a relationship, but meeting people at the bars just wasn't working for me. So, as most single college girls, I downloaded a dating app. I met a lot of people and talked to them online, and it gave me the confidence to try to actually go out on a date every now and then. I didn't meet up with many of these guys in person, but there were a few. Most didn't lead to a second date, but there was one that was worse than the rest. I met this guy named Alex, and we made plans to go out to dinner. He said he wanted to take me to this nice restaurant in the town between us, but when the day came, he never answered his phone. The next day, he contacts me with a story about getting stuck at work and forgetting his phone at home. Whatever, excuses. I wasn't really buying it, but then he asked to reschedule. Stupidly enough, I said yes. So the day comes and he tells me to meet him at his house, and he will drive us to the restaurant that he made reservations at. He said to come hungry like 3 times and kept reminding me to not eat beforehand. I guess this place has big plates. Now, I really don't like meeting people for the first time at their home or getting into their car, but we had been talking for over a week, so I figured what the heck. But when I got close and he calls and tells me to park in the parking lot down the road. Weird, but okay. Small driveway, I guess. Trouble is, I never told him what kind of car I drove, but he pulled into the parking lot right next to me and texted saying that he parked 2 spots down. Red flag number 1. So I get into his car, against my better judgment, and we start heading for the restaurant. Now, I didn't know where we were exactly. I'm not really familiar with the town, but I know the restaurant we were heading to, and it shouldn't have been more than like 10 minutes away, on a major highway. But almost 25 minutes later, we're driving down some dark back road, so I looked at him and said, "Hey, where the heck are we going anyway?" He proceeded to tell me that he hadn't told me the full story. Apparently, when he called to make reservations, it took 3 times of calling before they actually answered. And when someone finally did answer, they told him that they had moved locations and given him a description of where they were now located, like the intersection. My stomach dropped when I realized that we had passed that intersection probably 5 minutes before this point, and I realized that he didn't have an address punched into his GPS, even though the GPS was running. Red flag number 2. So I pulled up my GPS, punched in the name of the restaurant, and it said that the business was closed for the day. Red flag number 3. At this point, yes, I know I was being stupid, but I stayed and we hung out and talked, got to know each other. Still, the way that he went about things was kind of creepy. When he couldn't find the restaurant, he just kind of said, "Don't worry, I know a place we can go," and drove farther into the darkness, eventually pulling over to a trail in the woods, and told me we had to walk the rest of the way. He said we were going stargazing. The spot was beautiful and all, but the whole way through the woods to the clearing, he just kept cracking jokes about how he swore he wasn't a serial killer or something, and telling me to promise that I wasn't going to steal his keys and take the car and leave him there. Red flag number 4. I'm not sure how to explain this, but through half the night he just kept lying to me. He would tell me these big, elaborate, detailed stories, and then suddenly end with "just kidding, that never happened." It was funny the first time, when he tried to convince me that he got so drunk one night in college that he got himself pierced. But after 2 hours of this, I realized he had just been kidding about almost everything that he had said. I realized I didn't even really know any true thing about this guy. Red flag number 5. Yes, I know I'm an idiot. We were talking about going to watch a movie at his house. He was all for it and then apparently changed his mind and pulled the car over in front of a park, suddenly on the way back. He said he'd rather stay there. He kept trying to dare me to run naked through the park and asking me weirdly personal questions, like specific experiences, not even general thoughts or preferences. Suddenly, he demanded to know if I was going to kiss him or not before the night was over, and said that he wanted to put on chapstick first. This guy literally made me dig through my purse looking for chapstick while he sat in the driver's seat, making a big show of licking his lips and trying to subtly rub his you-know-what through his pants. But I saw. I told him I didn't have any chapstick, so he said that was fine. "Why don't you crawl on over here and show me what you got?" Cue patting his lap. I told him I didn't think that I was comfortable with that, and he then proceeded to reach around me to try to drag me into his lap, using me as leverage. I told him again that I had no intention of sleeping with him or anyone on a first date, and he again said that was fine, but how about a little 2-minute preview? Cue dragging my hand into his lap. Final red flag. Sirens are finally going off in my head. I got mad at this point. This was after he had spent days telling me how much he hates men who try to force themselves upon women, and how he doesn't understand how anyone could do that, let alone get pleasure from it. This after he said that he didn't want to sit too close to me while we were stargazing so he didn't make me uncomfortable. It was like a switch had flipped. I told him that trying to force me wasn't going to make me any more likely to agree, and that I thought that he was supposed to be a gentleman, like he'd been telling me all night that he was. He told me that he thought I was just scared, and that there were other options, again trying to grab my hand. I told him again that that wasn't going to happen, and he pouted about it. I was racking my brain trying to think of an excuse to get him to drive me back to my car, when he pulled out his phone, opened a text message thread, He wasn't hiding it. I could see that the last 3 messages were ones sent by him. And he looks at me and says that he got a text from his uncle that he lived with, saying that something had happened at the house and he needed to get home ASAP. I'm done at this point regardless, but I hate being lied to. If you weren't having a good time, you could have just asked to call it a night. Why lie? Why make up false intentions and then deliberately act the exact opposite way of what you said? Just why? To make things worse, he dropped me off at my car in a dark parking lot at midnight, and then just drove off before I had even walked to my car. Obviously, there wasn't going to be a second date. But the kicker? I drove by the old location of the restaurant a few days ago. It never moved. It's still open and right on the highway, and his house is about 2 minutes down the road. Where the heck was he taking me? So, creepy Alex from Bumble, let's not meet again. Also, I realized I forgot to include a large part of the date when I originally typed this. To anyone that read this far, I have one request. Don't be a jerk in the comments. Think about this from my perspective for a second. I don't need the "he just wanted to get laid" comments. If that was the case, why not take the opportunity when we were out stargazing? Why drive me around in circles 3 separate times and then try something in the parking lot of a playground with cops out patrolling? Why lie constantly? I'm saying that yes, he was probably just a creep, but the progression of events doesn't feel right to me. It was too erratic and felt like he was trying to get me lost and turned around. Pair that with the creepy things that he was saying and premeditation of lying about the restaurant. Something just felt very wrong. This happened in 2011. I'd just gotten out of a rough relationship a few months prior to this happening. My friends encouraged me to try dating again, so I caved and made a profile on the website Plenty of Fish. I was surprised with how many messages I'd received within the first few hours. Most were just people saying hi or asking to hook up. I wasn't looking for a hookup, so I ignored those messages. After about a week, a guy roughly an hour away from me messaged me. He was cute, so I messaged him back. The conversation was pretty casual at first. He asked if I'd like to go for a coffee sometime. Not thinking anything of it, I said sure. This is where it started to get weird. He started to get pushy and asked when we could grab a coffee. I told him I didn't have my own car, so I'd have to borrow my mom's car to meet up with him. He offered to come pick me up, but I wasn't comfortable with the idea. The next message made my blood run cold. It said, "I'm sure your hometown isn't that big. If I knocked on a few doors, someone would be able to tell me where you live." "Are you crazy?" I replied. "I'm sorry, but that's kind of creepy." This just made him angry. He messaged me multiple times after this. He said, "You know I have a gun. I could shoot you and make you disappear. No one would look for you. You're nothing but a dirty jerk. I could kill you. I'll throw you down a well and no one will ever find you." I was really scared at this point, so I asked him to please leave me alone. He replied with the following: "I know where your hometown is. It's not a big town. I can find you." At this point, I'd had enough and blocked him. I reported his account to Plenty of Fish and deleted my account. I was really on edge for the next few weeks after the fact. I was afraid he was actually going to come look for me. So, to the creepy guy who threatened to kill me on Plenty of Fish, let's not meet. Ever. I just came out of a relationship and felt like a bit of casual dating will be fun, so I went onto Tinder. I made it clear to the few people I actually matched with and spoke to that I didn't want anything serious, just a dinner date or a pub night here and there. I matched with a really cute guy, let's call him Pete. He had just moved to my city and also wasn't looking for anything serious. He just wanted to meet some people and see some local spots. The first night we met up at a well-known tapas bar. I chose this place because I had a few friends that were waitresses and bar staff there, so I felt safe meeting a stranger here. He was on time, we had nice chats, really cool guy on first impression. We spoke about work, to which he responded that he's a software developer, but he's just started his freelancing career. We spoke about where he stays now that he's moved up here, and he said that he's sharing a place with some friends. Rent is quite pricey in this city, so it made sense to me. He asked where I live, and I told him that I'm lucky to have my own one-bedroom apartment in quite a nice and popular part of town, mostly thanks to my parents that helped me save and gave me a portion of the deposit money for my 21st birthday, which I invested and grew until I had enough to put down a decent deposit. He then offered to drop me off at home, but I said no. I'd prefer to Uber home by myself. He asked if this was because I'm going to go meet someone else after him, and I laughed because I genuinely thought this was a joke. The next time I saw Pete was about 3 days later. He said he knew it was fast, but he actually couldn't stop thinking about me and he wanted to see me again. This time we met at a different restaurant, also one I chose because I went to school with the owner and knew all the staff pretty well. The place is a little bit more pricey, and he got super annoyed with me for ordering as much as I did. I couldn't understand why, since I insisted on paying for my own stuff both times we met. That night, same story. Let me drop you off at home, please. Again, I said no. While we're in the middle of this conversation, he gets a call. He stepped away, but I could still hear a fair amount. No, I think I'm going to stay with you again. Yeah, I'm with her. Don't worry about it. Okay, I'll be home soon. So now I think he's chatting to his roommate, or maybe his mom, but I don't ask. He comes back to our table. Please, I insist. Bad things happen to women that Uber home this late by themselves. I'd feel better if I dropped you off. Not having the energy to argue, I tell him fine, and I put my address into his GPS. As soon as he got home, he messages me and tells me he'll be picking me up in the morning to go for a picnic. I reply that I actually have cleaning to do, but again, he insists that he'll see me at 10. Come 10 a.m. that next morning, best believe he's right outside of my apartment. I get into his car, and as he leans over to kiss my cheek, I notice that his breath stinks. Obviously, I'm a little grossed out. We have our picnic, and it's quite nice. He tried to kiss me a few times, but I avoided it with everything in me. By about 4 p.m., I tell him that I really want to go home, and the park we went to is about an hour-and-a-half drive from my apartment, so I couldn't really Uber back home because it would cost a fortune. He agrees it's time to go, so we get in his car and we're off. I fell asleep in the car on the drive back, and when I woke up, he asked if we should finish the rest of the bubbly we got for mimosas up at my apartment. I said to him, I don't want to, and he just snaps. He raised his voice and said something along the lines of, "What are you hiding from me? Just be honest. Why are you so desperate to keep me out of your apartment?" I was so confused I actually just kept quiet. He dropped me off, but I could see his car across from my apartment for about half an hour before he actually left. About 5 minutes after he left, he let me know that he's home safe and he thinks he's starting to fall for me. So naturally I'm freaked out, because I made it clear that I didn't want anything serious, and he said he felt the same. I said to him if that's the case, I think we should take a break from hanging out with each other. About 5 days later, he messages and asks if we can go for dinner again. He found an Indian cuisine place he knows I'll love. I tell him it's cool, he should just send me the address. He tells me that he'll pick me up. So 7 p.m. comes, he tells me he's downstairs, and as I go down to meet him, I see he's standing at my gate. I pressed the remote control to open the gate, and he walked inside to meet me. "Show me which one is yours. I'd love to see how you live." Not hi, not how are you. That's his opening line. So now I'm naturally unsettled. I say to him that I'm starving. Could we go for dinner and I'll show him my place at a later stage? At dinner, he gets a call again. This time, he didn't step away. "Pete." "Yeah, I don't know. I can let you know by about 10. He then turns to me. "Am I sleeping by you tonight?" Me. No, I don't know. I have work tomorrow." Pete to me. "Yes, me too." Then back to the caller.
I'll let you know, okay? Caller. No, you're not. Can you just get your things, please? Pete. And do what with them? Caller. Take them to that girl you're seeing. I'm done asking you. Now I'm sitting here in absolute shock and terror. What in the heck is going on here? Our food arrives and we barely speak. I say to him, "Why did you ask me if you can sleep over by me? We're not spending time together like that. You know this." He then spins this story about how he just wants to hang out and again see how I live. I then say to him, very frankly, that I don't like having strangers in my apartment. He gets very touched and the bill arrives. As per usual, I pay for myself, he pays for himself. I say to him, "I'll get an Uber home," and he says, "What's the use? I already know where you live. Let me drop you off." By now I've already decided that this will be the last time I see him. I get into his car and I reach for my jumper that I threw in the back when he fetched me. I notice a bag in the back of the car, full of clothes and toiletries, as well as a pillow. I don't think much of it. I don't personally drive or own a car, but I know my sister always has the most random stuff on the back seat of her car. On the way home, he's dead quiet, when suddenly he says, "Do you know how selfish you are? I've had no issue driving you around, but you don't want me to sleep over by you." I say to him that I've never had an issue with Ubering, and if he's so touched, I also have no issue with paying him what the Ubers would have cost me. I'm over this, and I'm not even playing nice anymore. His phone rings again. Caller. "Your stuff is at the security boom at the gate, Pete. Stay with your girlfriend or stay with your mom. You're messed up for taking advantage of everyone like this." Pete. "I don't speak to my mom. You know this, you jerk." And then hangs up. Now I think this is maybe an ex-girlfriend that he needs to collect things from. Before I've even had a chance to process what happened, he turns to me and starts yelling at me. "I have nowhere to go. Are you happy? You spoiled brat? Living off mommy and daddy's money, getting driven around by me like I work for you." My whole body got stiff with fear. I don't know if I'm going to cry or throw up. In my head, I'm just planning how I'm going to grab my bag the second he stops and run straight to the cafe under my apartment. If you run through the cafe, you can get to a gate that takes you to the back part of my apartment, and it works with fingerprint access. There wasn't time to still find my keys in my bag, and I didn't want the main gate I normally use to open wide enough for him to get in when I go in. He stops at my apartment, and as planned, I jump out, run into the cafe, run out the back, through the little gate, up to the second floor. My apartment was on the fourth floor, and I hammered on a neighbor's door. I went inside and told her and her husband everything that happened, and asked if they would mind calling the cafe to explain why I ran through with no explanation and in such a state. I blocked Pete and I haven't seen him since. I'm still not sure what his case was. From what I gathered, he was basically homeless, and I think he wanted to get into my apartment to maybe sleep over there for a while. I'm not sure if the girl that kept calling him was also a Tinder date that let her into his apartment and he just never left. All I know is that he scared the living daylights out of me, and I never ever want to see him again.
A few years ago, I was on a dating site where I matched with a police officer. I thought his dog was cute and figured this was my opportunity to finally pet a canine police dog. I was quickly disinterested after listening to him complain about his recent divorce. I don't recall details, but I remember it was very apparent that he was the problematic person in that relationship. I was also really grossed out by how he fetishized me for my big sloppers, tattoos, and colorful hair. I was very upfront and told him I wasn't interested and that he was setting off some red flags for me. He begged me to give him a chance, but I said no and blocked his number. A few days later, I get a knock on my door at around midnight. My heart dropped into my butt. It startled me so much. I look out my peephole and see a stranger holding food. It's an Uber Eats delivery driver. I tell him through the door that I didn't order food, but he said someone else ordered it and then he knew my name. I asked who ordered it, and he said a name that I didn't recognize. I tell him I don't want the food and give him directions to the dumpster to throw the food out. because at this point I have no idea if he's actually from Uber. Later on, I'm going through my dating app matches and realize that it was the cop's name. I go through my blocked messages, and this guy had texted me a lot. The last text, "I hope you liked your dinner." I decide it's best to unblock this man so I can keep an eye on what he is saying, in case I need to be worried about my safety, or if I'm going to need to go buy some bear mace to drop a cop. A few weeks later, I'm at work. I'm a hairstylist, and I get a call from a number that I don't recognize. I answer because I assume it's a new client. The voice on the other line says, "Hey Rachel, I'm at Starbucks across the street. What's your drink order?" I ask, "Who is this?" "I don't have you in my appointment book," assuming it's a regular and I made a scheduling error. He says his name, and again my heart drops into my butt. How does he know where I work? I ask him how does he know where I live and work, and he explains that he did a reverse image search on photos from my dating profile, found my social media and my Yelp page from my salon, then looked up your address from there. I tell him that I'm going to call his station and report him for stalking, and if he ever comes near me, I will consider it a threat and will be ready to physically defend myself. After all of that, he still begs me to give him a chance. I hang up, call the police station that he works for, very small town, and complain. They won't even let me email screenshots of my creepy texts. I could tell nothing would be done. The lady literally said, "Oh, I'm sorry, he's going through a lot right now. Literally treat it like he's the victim." He mostly left me alone after this, but I was so scared living alone for the first time in my life. I have a semi-popular meme page on Instagram with about 8,000 followers. I sifted through and found like 5 of his accounts. I blocked them and moved on. This was several years ago, but all these memories came flooding back when I noticed a familiar profile photo on an account who commented on a post. I must have missed an account of his when blocking. I had posted a photo of me holding 2 big tunas that I caught on a fishing trip, and he commented, "God, I wish I was one of those fish. I'd love to know what it's like to be held by you."
So this just happened today. Against my better judgment at the beginning of the month, I got a Tinder. I matched with a few guys, etc. One of them is James. We ended up texting each other and he seemed pretty chill and pretty into me. He's a decent looking guy and we seemed to click. He had apparently been in a relatively abusive relationship with a woman and he was looking to start over. According to him, she had hit him with a frying pan and pepper sprayed him once. He kept going on about how crazy she was. All right, it happens. We went out to the movies this past Friday and I had a great time. We ended up talking for a few hours and we hit it off pretty well. I asked about the ex because I was a bit curious as to why he'd stay with someone like that. He didn't say anything positive about her, just that she was crazy, had mental illnesses and didn't take her meds, that kind of stuff. She had tried to baby trap him, but she had a miscarriage. He expressed relief that she didn't end up with the kid. He said he had felt obligated to her. Again, I get that. In all, I had a good time. This morning rolls around and he tells me that he had hooked up with his ex last night and that he was going to try and work things out with her. Mildly insulting that I lost out to an abusive chick, but whatever. I tell him it's cool. He then a few hours later texted me to say that she was crazy and he thought she was changing but she wasn't, blah blah. He kept asking if he could see me. He was being very pushy about wanting to see me today. He begged for 5 minutes of my time so he could explain to me. I politely told him that I didn't want to be involved with someone who was so clearly hung up on his ex. This is where it got nuts. He admitted he still was, but that he wanted to see me today so I could meet her, and she could determine if I was better for him than she was, and that she wanted him to be happy because he and I had a connection. I flipped after that, told him that the fact he needed his ex to determine who was right for him was absolutely nuts, and that is not what love is, and that I wanted no part of it. His ex started texting me after that, and it was nonstop insults and incoherent stuff that made no sense. She also dropped the bomb that she was his wife. I told her to screw off and block the number. I went on Tinder to message him where I called him a piece of crap, and if he was intelligent, he should leave her and never message me again. He started to harass me, saying that I was miserable because they have a beautiful love together and all this crazy stuff. He then went on to say, "My wife knows where you work. I hope she doesn't do anything rash." And I told him if that was a threat, I would gladly go to the police. He then said that she's been to jail before, she's not afraid, and that she loves him so much she'd mess anyone up and risk jail for him, that she'd kill my friends if they tried to protect me, that she's armed and dangerous. I told him goodbye, reported him, and deleted my Tinder account. I did go to the police tonight, but since it wasn't a direct threat, they can't do much. The cop thinks that James was more or less full of crap and just trying to scare me, since some people love getting off on that stuff. He said I did the right thing by blocking him and reporting him, and said I should just keep my eyes open and alert the people at my job. Scary thing is, James seemed perfectly normal, but he lied about being married, how he felt towards his wife, and he flipped like a switch. His excuse for not being upfront about being married was that they were going to get a divorce. He seemed so docile and unassuming, and the hatred and aggressive attitude was insane. I have to honestly wonder what would have happened had I gone to talk for 5 minutes. I'm kind of concerned since they do know where I work, but if either of them try anything, then the cops can actually nail them. What a weekend. I went on a Tinder date some time ago while I was adjusting to a new city I had moved to. I didn't really know anybody there, so I used some online dating apps to see the dating scene around town. I landed one from a girl that seemed just like an artsy hippie type of girl. We had a few exchanges through the Tinder app and then decided to meet up for a drink. I picked her up at her house and she greeted me at the door and gave me a hug. She said the name of a local bar she wanted to go to for us to chat and get to know each other. I told her I would drive and proceeded to my car. The first red flag I noticed was when I walked to my car and opened the door. She had just followed me to the driver's side and was standing behind me staring. I looked at her blankly for about 15 seconds and asked her if she was going to get in.
She said, "Sure, I would love to,"
and went the long way to the passenger side around the back of the car. Since I had just met the girl, I figured she had just maybe smoked some weed or something, as I had kind of got the vibe she was a bit of a stoner. As I was driving to the bar, she talked in a very low voice, almost as if she was trying to whisper. I am not hard of hearing or anything, but I had to ask her to repeat herself several times just so I could make out the full sentences she was saying. When we got to the bar, I made sure we got a seat closer to the back away from most people, just so I could have a little quiet in order to hear her. The conversations honestly carried on as normal from this point, and it was actually a fun time for the time being. We talked about different things we were interested in, and she did bring up she did recreationally use weed and a few other tripping substances, like shrooms and such. I am not much of a fan of these, but it at least made me relax in the back of my mind to think maybe she was just high off marijuana, and that rationally explained some of the out there behavior. Granted, I had a few drinks at this point, so I was honestly not thinking straight. I asked her if she wanted to go to my place after drinks, and she agreed. When we got to my place, we had a few more drinks. Then she started talking about her jewelry. This is where it gets weird. She told me her jewelry was her big secret, and it defined her. When I asked her why it was so important, she said, "I'm actually Anastasia, and I was never killed in Russia. My jewelry is my link to my past." It was hard for me to take that serious at this point with how much I drank, so I kind of challenged that statement using the little bit I knew about history. At this point, she freaked out and started yelling at the top of her lungs about how I don't respect ancestors and history. Then she got quit and tiptoed right up to me and grabbed me by the neck. She then brought my face eye to eye with hers while still holding my neck. She says at this point, "I am a shaman, and I will curse you. My ancestors have destroyed many people, and you do not respect that. You are from oppressive ancestors, and they will be punished." Then she put her hand in a whiskey glass and made a cross on my face and kissed my forehead. At this point, I started to sober up a little. I talked her into calming down, telling her I was only joking. Then she slowly started getting back to normal. Then, she started talking about her cat fetish. She tells me she has a list of people who she tames to act as cats. I am not about judging people on their fetishes, so I listen in. She then tells me all the things she does to them and starts acting like a cat in my living room. If she had not yelled at me earlier on, I might have almost been turned on by it. My red flags in my head were tingling like crazy at this point, so I just listened and tried not to set her off. She noticed sage on my kitchen counter and asked me to let her light it and bless the house. Side note, I use sage to make my house smell better occasionally. It's kind of a ritual I like to do, but it's mine and mine own, something I take very personally and like to do myself. I tell her no, she can't light it and that it's my thing to do on my own. Then, she freaks out telling me I am a horrible human being and screaming all over the place. I tell her I can take her home now, and she runs to the door and goes outside. As I get outside, she is screaming at the top of her lungs that I am a horrible person, and I should go die. I tell her she can walk herself home then, and I go back to my place and lock the door. She then starts banging on the door hard in about 10 minutes, saying she left her phone in there. I grab her phone off the kitchen counter and open the door to hand it to her. She tries to barge inside and I block her with my forearm. She then acts like she is about to punch me. I just hold my ground and tell her she is not coming in. She screams she wanted the whiskey bottle we were drinking from. I told her heck no, because I paid for the thing. I slam the door at that point and lock it. I hear her bang on the door for a minute. I then hear her footsteps going down the stairs. I waited about an hour and then went walking outside to see if she was still hanging around. I didn't see her, nor did I ever see her again after that. I know this is probably not the scariest encounter ever, but for the next few nights I was creeped out always walking around the area I live to make sure she wasn't hanging around. I honestly hope she is okay wherever she is, but I hope to never see her again.
I met a guy on Tinder, and we really started to hit it off. We'd been chatting for a few weeks and even discovered we had a few mutual friends. I was pretty intoxicated one night, was feeling social, and decided to call an Uber to his place. Once I got there, we talked outside for a while, and ended up even vibing even better in person. I opened up to him about my health problems, and he opened up to me about his older sister who had passed away from a similar condition to mine. I was curious about his sister, but I definitely didn't want to pry. We walked into his house, and it smelled like 1,000 dead rats were rotting under the floorboard. I was still pretty drunk, so I tried to forgive it because, hey, sometimes animals die under the house, or in the walls, and there's nothing you can really do about it. I start to look around, and the whole house looks like a cluttered storage unit. He takes me to his room, which is seemingly normal. Kind of feminine, but that's cool, and we hook up. I ended up falling asleep there and woke up at around 10 a.m. to the stench of death. I opened my eyes feeling very sober and started to look around the room. I noticed that only girls' clothes were hung up in his closet. I start to assume I've possibly been cheated with. Then I see a giant black binder on his nightstand. When he woke up, I decided to jokingly ask him, "What's in the giant binder?" Turns out, it was every single episode of Golden Girls printed out. He said he read it at work, and it's the only show he'll ever watch. Okay. I asked him what he did for work, something I definitely should have known by this point, and he dodged the question. I sat up and looked at the pillow I'd been cozily sleeping on. It had no pillowcase and was covered in what looked to be old blood. It looked like the blood that he had just coughed onto it. I started putting the unpleasant pieces together. I asked as sensitively as I could, "Hey, was this your sister's room? I noticed the clothes in the closet." He says, "Yeah, and this is her bed. I haven't changed or washed anything." It just makes me feel better to be in her bed. This is actually where I held her when she died, and you remind me so much of her. I really, really like you." And then casually tried to hook up with me, like he didn't just drop unsettling news. I definitely felt immensely sorry for him, but I needed to get out of there. I made up some excuse and left. I decided to not entirely ghost him because of how bad I felt for him. He was clearly dealing with some really dark stuff. We kept in contact for a few weeks, until I went on my Find My Friends app and noticed that he had clearly taken my phone while I was asleep that night and shared my location with himself. I called him and went off. This was not my first rodeo with a stalker type, and I was not dealing with it. He told me that he couldn't believe I thought he would do that, and I'm being a really terrible person dumping on him because his cat recently died. I blocked him. After he said that about his cat, combined with his tendency to hold on to things, it really makes me wonder what that smell actually was. Let's hope not. And though I hope he gets help, I never want to see him again.
I just need to type this story out because it's still so unbelievably surreal to me that I can't even believe it's real. I'm not sure if this is the right sub to be posting this, but hopefully it applies. Apologies in advance because this will probably get long. So last fall, I started using dating apps seriously because I really wanted to branch out and meet new guys. I moved back home after I graduated college in May, which was still the pretty early stages of COVID, so I was lonely. I've only ever used Tinder, so my friend told me I should try Bumble, and at first it was fun. I matched with a few guys and they were nice, but the convos kind of died off after a while. I didn't really form a real connection with anyone on there. One of the guys I matched with asked for my Snapchat, which I gave to him so we could talk on there, and we also followed each other on Instagram. That kind of stuff is harmless to me, and I really don't think much of it. Our convos didn't last long, and we stopped talking after just a few days. He was a little strange, and I was turned off by it. Fast forward a couple months, and I get a message from him on Instagram. He told me he unfollowed me because of my support for Joe Biden in the election, and then proceeded to spam me with probably over 40 messages trying to convince me to change my views and vote for Trump. I'm a very liberal person, and if I would have known he was like this, I would have never spoken to him. He kept telling me people have blocked him for doing this before, and to, please just understand where he's coming from. His last few messages were memes to ease the tension of the one-sided convo. He and I never even talked long enough for him to feel comfortable messaging me like this. I didn't respond. I didn't even block him. I opened the messages so he could see I saw them, and then unfollowed him. The next morning, I got notifications telling me, "This message has been unsent by the sender," for every single message. Of course, I screen recorded it and sent it to my friend to tell her what happened, because it was creepy and bizarre. It was over after that though, and the topic of this guy didn't come up again, so I moved on. A few weeks ago, I was scrolling through Facebook, and I saw a post from a local news station that was shared from the town this guy was from in my state, that's about an hour away from me. It was a news article about a guy who shot and killed an 87-year-old woman who lived in his apartment complex with a semi-automatic rifle. He was trying to get other residents out of their apartments until he was shot and killed as well by a resident in order to protect the others who lived there. As I was reading about this, the guy's name and face seemed so familiar, and then it clicked. It was the same guy. I went back to the screen recording of the messages I took months ago, and they confirmed it was him. I'm not sure how to describe what my response was, but I got really sweaty, and my heart was racing when I made the realization. It's extremely disturbing knowing that I spoke to this man, and even had a weird experience with him. It's been a few weeks since I found out, and I still feel weird about it. I was just reading about it again today since more details have been reported since the initial shooting. Sometimes I think about the what-ifs. Like, what if I had responded to his messages the way I wanted to, and called him a creep and a weirdo, and he tried to harm me? God. I hope the woman he unfairly murdered is resting in eternal peace. Thank you for reading if you made it this far, and be wary of people on dating apps.
I decided to go ahead and make this account, to type this story out and get sucked into the rabbit hole that is this app. I don't know if I actually avoided something sinister for a fact, but I'd rather play it all safe and say that I did. I'm a 29-year-old female, and while I'm well-traveled and have been around quite a bit, I do occasionally make some pretty rookie mistakes. My fault, and I make no excuses. I try to remain diligent and alert, but I'm very capable of letting my guard down. So after being here in the US for about 2 months, I decided that I was bored sitting around my unit watching 90 Day Fiancé. So I decided to make the old dating profiles again. I made no specific intentions known about what I was interested in accomplishing, as I don't really know myself. I just wanted someone to hang out with and see where it goes naturally. I ended up matching with this one guy who had shared interests with me. We chatted a bit over the app, and eventually I felt okay to give him my number. After talking back and forth for a couple of weeks, I agreed to a meetup. We met at a pub and have a couple of drinks. I'll admit at first I didn't recognize him because he didn't resemble his photos to the extent that I was expecting. He didn't look bad by any means, but I could tell that he used older pictures and edited them enough to where he seemed more appealing. I swear I'm not trying to sound superficial because he was cute. Just not what I was expecting. But I also think we've hit a point in social media culture where it's safe to assume that we won't see the same thing in real life as we do online. And that's okay. We did hit it off. We discussed the usual first date stuff. Then we got into more detail. I told him about back home and work, and how life was different than here in the States. At one point, we were talking and holding hands, and I felt comfortable enough to let him kiss me. Well, he asked me as we were leaving if I wanted to go back to his place for a cup of coffee. I told him I knew what coffee really meant, and that I didn't want to do that on a first date. He assured me that it would be 1 cup of coffee, and that he would give me a lift home so that I didn't have to call an Uber. I accepted his offer and we walked to his apartment, which was a few blocks away. As we were going upstairs, he made a few questionable remarks. He mentioned how I wasn't like most girls because I accepted his invitation, and alluded that, you never know, I could be a psychopath. He then motioned with his eyes down to my dress and inquired about my size. I told him again that I was sorry, but the night would not end with him getting lucky. As we got into his unit, he dismissed himself to the toilet and left me sitting on his bed. It was a studio, and he didn't have a couch. As I'm sitting there and waiting for him to finish doing whatever he was actually doing, I noticed in the corner by his bed that he had 2 masks. One was a cartoon-looking goat mask, and another was a cat or maybe a tiger. What was more alarming was that he also had a Bowie knife and a small woodcutter's axe only a short distance away from them. Upon further investigation, I also noticed there was a black jumper draped over a dresser. Then on his bedside table there were a pair of latex gloves. Yawns. Okay, I don't much feel like being murdered tonight. I got up and calmly left the unit. Then I made haste down the stairs and down the street where I was able to catch a lift. Now look, I may have just really hurt his feelings because he had no malicious intent. But if that's all that happened, then I'd prefer that over the possible alternative. All of these items alone wouldn't have been that bad, but all of these random items within a short walk from each other, I'd rather not chance it. I do feel bad for leaving a person, but I don't feel bad about leaving what could have potentially been a dangerous situation. That, along with his random personality change, was enough for me to make the call that I made. As of recently, I noticed that he either blocked me from Tinder or deleted the app. Thanks for having a read. I hope the weekend finds you all well. It's hot, so please drink heaps of water. Stay safe, and lots of love. About 7 years ago, right before I met my now husband, I joined a few dating apps. A few of my friends had wonderful experiences and met their now spouses, so I figured I'd give it a try. I was 21 at the time and also had recently lost quite a bit of weight and was tiny for the first time in my life, so I was ready to put myself out there. I didn't take it too seriously, let the men come to me, and eventually there was a guy who caught my eye. His name, we'll call him Watson, was 23 and very handsome in my then opinion. We matched on Bumble and kept talking for quite a while. It turned into texting, then phone calls, and then him asking to meet up. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think I have any superpowers or can tell the future, but when he asked to start seeing each other in person, I just had an off gut feeling. I thought maybe it was just anxiety, but later I found out I just knew. After blowing off plans and saying I was busy multiple times, he got mad and blocked me on everything. That was fine. I felt a bit bad, but I was also 21 and he gave me the creeps, so good riddance. Fast forward 6 months later, I had met and started dating my now husband. I got a message from Watson on Facebook and let him know that I had someone new and I wished him well. He got angry, oddly for someone I had never met in person, calling me names, swearing a ton, so I blocked him. Then came the spam accounts, the new Instagram handles, more name calling, which became threats. Thankfully, he did back off and stop eventually. I was so relieved. I hadn't dealt with someone like this before or after, so I was genuinely scared. A year later, I was at Target shopping for some new shoes and makeup. I checked out, headed to my car, keys in hand. I had just opened my door after loading my trunk when I heard someone yelling my name, and I turned around thinking it was a friend or coworker. But alas, it was Watson. I got into my car without a word. I definitely went into fight or flight mode, and I was ready to fly. The last thing I saw was him standing in the middle of the Target parking lot after chasing my car. It's been years, and I haven't heard or seen him again, and I hope to never have another creepy encounter. Public service announcement. Don't chase girls. We hate that. I'm a 29-year-old female, and I matched with a guy who was a 27-year-old male on Bumble. He seemed like a nice guy, and after talking for a bit, I found out he owns and runs a bakery just down the street from my workplace. Since it was the BFF version of Bumble, I wasn't looking for anything, and he told me to drop by his bakery sometime so we could chat and he could feed me brownies. I popped by one evening and he was such a sweetheart, getting me to try a few things that he had baked. Got one of his employees to sing for me, and we went for a walk to talk about ourselves. He even packed me a few things to take for my mom. I thought it was really sweet. He talked about just being friends and seeing how things pan out. The next day, we texted each other all day, and he asked me out for lunch. He took me to a 5-star hotel. Things were going pretty normal until he started feeding me with his hand, and he asked if he could hold my hand. I agreed because I didn't want to create a scene at a fine dining restaurant, and he started telling me about being in a relationship and how happy I make him. He said he would like to call me his baby, and said that he wants this to go on for a long time and eventually get married. He talked about how he wants to spoil me and build an empire, so I don't have to work for money. I couldn't speak up because the restaurant was so quiet, and I didn't know how he would react. He kept touching my face, kissing my forehead, and mouthing "I love you" to me. I was frozen, and the thing that scared me the most was he ordered coffee after the meal, and he started shouting to call the waiter, and said we have been waiting for 30 minutes for the coffee, when it had only been a few minutes. I was so embarrassed and scared to try to even calm him down. Now he keeps calling me baby and texting me sweet things, calling me on the phone when I don't reply to his messages. He said he doesn't know anything about me but has fallen for me. We've only met twice and spoken for maybe 5 to 6 days. He said his first love passed away and he has been struggling mentally since then, and after having lost a lot of close ones after the incident. He says he's been able to finally get a full night's sleep after he met me. He keeps calling me his and talks about getting married. I'm scared and don't know how to end things with him. I need some suggestions on how I can handle it. Please. Thank you so much for listening to all of the stories in this video. I hope you enjoyed them. I also hope that you enjoy the extra rain at the end. Get a good night's sleep, everyone, and I'll read to you in the next video. Bye-bye now.